Welcome back to another episode of the Wrinkly Brain Podcast, where we like to goof, gaff, and talk about the EDH format and other formats we feel like talking about. I'm one of your hosts, Cameron, and today with me I have Jason.
Hello.
And Ethan.
Hello.
Before we get into it, we have a quick announcement, and that's that we're moving this podcast and SmoothBrainEDH's other content that's not gameplay to its own channel called WrinklyBrainEDH. Please subscribe to the other channel to keep up with this podcast and any other content that we feel like doing. With that out of the way, let's talk about our topic today, which is EDH macro archetypes and how they differ from a more traditional 60-card constructed archetype and how those affect a casual play group.
Yeah, so this is going to be an area where a lot of people already have some baseline familiarity. You've already heard the terms like, oh, I'm playing an aggro deck, I'm playing a control deck, I'm playing combo. But what do those actually mean? And for Commander, how is that different? So let's start with the basic main archetypes that people are familiar with. First one being aggro. Base goal is get opponent dead fast.
It's pretty self-explanatory. You're aggressive. It's very broad. I mean, so as it relates to 60-card archetypes, obviously aggro, it's very wide what you could be doing. It could be as easy as like Burn or Burn's cousin Mill. They're both kind of aggro-y.
Yeah. The main thing you're trying to do is just, as I said, deplete an opponent's resource, usually their life total, as quickly as possible. And doing so, you're often trying to minimize your reliance on board state variations to execute your game plan. So you're just trying to make sure that if your opponent has a hate piece, it doesn't affect you very much. You just want to hit them, you want to go, you're playing your small creatures. If there's a blocker in the way, sure, you'll play a little removal to make sure the blocker's gone. Or you can play Burn and just ignore the board state almost entirely and go straight to face.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of different ways to aggro. You could do something like Elves, which is Elf Ball, which is an aggressive slanted creature deck. I mean, most tribal decks slant to be aggressive. Humans,
yeah, absolutely.
What's the other one? Goblin. Well, Goblins, there's an argument for other ones that we'll get to later. But they win through depleting their resources, like opponent's life total. Legacy Goblins does some land destruction. Would 8-Rack be an aggressive deck, aggro deck? I know.
No.
Our love for 8-Rack and it's 4 players still.
Honestly, just from the first 30 seconds of this episode, I'm already wanting to say there's too much nuance to say this is a definite aggro deck. This is like Burn. There's too much nuance.
Yep.
Like when you said that Mill is an aggro deck, I think you said at one point. I disagree. I feel it's more of a control.
There are aggro mill decks.
There are different variations.
Like to shoehorn all those into one macro archetype is hard. Yes. And so this is, we need to set the archetypes up really quick. It's hard to not just like say a bunch of them to give examples. Because like Elves, it's kind of a combo aggro, right? Technically. Yeah.
That's
in a way.
I keep on wanting to like jump in and say, well,
yeah, that's also why hybrid is down here is something to talk about.
Most decks are hybrid.
Let's I guess run through all the different archetypes real quick.
Yeah, it's very hard to find decks that purely fall into one archetype. Because one of the other things I said, like, you know, you're not trying to disrupt your opponent much when you play aggro, but that doesn't mean you don't disrupt your opponent.
Yeah,
right. You still need to have some counterplay to what your opponent's doing. You're just trying to make it so you don't need as much as your opponent does.
Bolt still hits creatures and players, you know? There's a lot of flexibility in that strategy, but you also want to be able to remove what your opponent's doing so your strategy can punch through really quick. That's why sideboards and 60-card formats are very important. So, and then also talking about sideboarding, combo decks obviously use the sideboard a lot to deal with, you know, opponent strategies. But those decks in general are just trying to, without the combat step generally, to find a way to win the game. So, for instance, like Sneak Attack is just trying to find an Emrakul really quickly, get that out. Storm is trying to do a big long combo turn in order to, win the game immediately. I feel like the best combo deck example is like a Lethal Grape Shot. Because generally, unless you're going for the early empty the warrens plan, you're going to be winning with a big combo turn.
Yeah. Talking about combo, the second big archetype to talk about here, obviously you're trying to assemble combinations of cards that create a synergy between the two of them, that it creates a larger effect than just what the individual cards do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that can be something like getting Emrakul into play and attacking for 15 on turn 3. That doesn't necessarily kill your opponent, but it functionally does.
Mm-hmm.
You can do your cast 20 spells, Lethal Grape Shot, or 10 spells, your Tendrils of Agony. Or you can do getting 6 Mountains and a Valakut Molten Pinnacle into play to deal 18 damage in a single turn. Or you can do the infamous 2-card combos like Splinter Twin, or our favorite EDH combo, Demonic Consultation and Thassa's Oracle.
Boo.
Right? And there's so much variation into it that... gentlemen, do you remember the meme I shared with you of the MTG combo alignment chart?
Yes, and they
oh my lord, I have to go reference it.
I am forgetting the name of the person who created this chart and shared it to Reddit. I will find it in a moment.
This is excellent.
But it is a 3x3 alignment chart with repetition and potency, which potency meaning it has to kill, repetition meaning you're repeating an action. So a purist example would be the Splinter Twin style combos, where you take part A and part B, combine them together to do an action an infinite number of times and kill your opponent.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
So like Heliod Ballista is like an infinite combo in that regard.
Yep. And then Storm, for example, its repetition is neutral. So you're repeating it a high number of times, but it's not truly infinite.
Mm-hmm.
But you are killing your opponent in that turn. And you have a Rebellion version of this, which is you're just combining the two things. It's going to kill you, but, Channel Fireball is a combo. That's the example that you use.
You can't repeat it. You do it once.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Then you have things like Repetition Purist, where you're repeating an infinite number of times, but you're not necessarily killing that turn. And that's like Squirrel's Nest combos, for example. You make an infinite number of squirrels, but they can't swing that turn. The true neutral that they have is Amulet Titan, which any modern player will tell you is a combo deck.
Yes,
of course.
They can kill you on turn 2. It is rare. I've had it happen.
You can potentially create a lethal threat. May not happen that turn, though. You're just going to get so far ahead. And then the Rebellious on repetition and potency neutral is Emrakul the Aeon's Torn through the Breach combo, where you swing for that 15. You're probably killing them, but they're not actually dead.
Not dead, but, Annihilator, whatever, 6.
And all right, and then Purist repetition with Rebel potency, you creating some amount of value. And that's Spike Feeder Heliod, where you will just gain infinite life. You haven't won the game, but you have done something an infinite number of times.
Yes, you have done a game action.
Mm-hmm. The repetition neutral and potency rebel would be something like Thopter Sword combo, where you can maybe create an infinite board of 1/1s and gain infinite life. That's not necessarily a guarantee, because you would need another piece to do that. But you combine the two effects for to turn 1 mana into a Thopter and a life, right? And then the radical one on rebel and potency is Tron is a combo.
Tron's a combo.
I mean,
you count 1, 2, 7.
It is a combo, right? Can we all just kind of agree on that?
So I am very much in the radical belief of what a combo is, where it is just a combo is a combination of 2 cards that creates an effect that is larger than what the individual 2 cards do. I don't care if the combo is I played a life gain spell and that caused my my creature to get a 1/1 counter, right?
That's a combo.
A Johnny's Pride mate sort of thing, right? To me, that's a combo.
Okay.
You cause that trigger. But it's the most radical definition of combo in that sense, right? Because,
everything's a combo.
Hear me out on this, though. Here is the most radical combo in the entire game. I have my full art mountain alongside my beat up white border mountain to make my opponent tilt.
You're right.
That's a combo.
That's a combo.
That's a combo.
Right. So, and synergy and combo are oftentimes used interchangeably. For me, the combo is the cards plus the effect, and the synergy is the effect.
That's a good way of distinguishing.
I haven't heard that description of it before, so I like that. I do wonder if it is accurate in a lot of situations, but from a theoretical level, I do like that.
It works when you use my definition, where you're saying, any 2 combinations of cards creates a combo, so long as the effect is greater than just the individual cards. But if you don't use that definition, then obviously there's a problem there.
Yeah.
But anyway, so now we've broken down what combo's doing. You're usually trying to kill somebody with a combo of some kind. If it's your 2 mountains, go for it. But it could be something else.
Is playing your lands in front a combo?
No, that's called being a dumbass. Hot take.
Maybe. Next one is control. In this case, the point is to limit your opponent's resources and get ahead of them and win over the course of a long game. You can be doing your 1-for-1 control where you have like a Planeswalker finisher. You can play stacks decks where you're just trying to keep your opponents from playing the game altogether. Or you can do recursive-oriented value decks where you deny your opponent's resources. And a famous example for us is Legacy Lands, which people don't think is a control deck. It has a big combo in it, of course, with creating its 20/20 and killing you. Good old Merit Lage.
Yeah.
But the main core of that deck is to deny your opponent's resources and do things like Wasteland Lock them.
Wasteland Locks, Punishing Fire is a great control tool in that deck, and then Tabernacle. It's very much a control deck.
Yeah, you're just trying to control your opponent's deck. It's a radical version of control, but it is a control deck.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can do something like Lantern Control, where the goal is to control the top card of your opponent's deck.
Yeah, that was a cool deck. I hated playing against it, but like wasn't there a little bit of time there where it was good, just for a little.
Yeah, it was the best deck in the format for a while, but it was only the best deck by the best pilots.
Yep.
Yeah, no, not anybody could play that deck.
So much meta knowledge was required to pilot that deck effectively that anyone that wasn't devoted to it would just never be able to attain that level of success.
Yeah, it's very comparable to the Krark Clan Ironworks combo decks, where if you are not a dedicated Krark Clan Ironworks player, if you're not Matt Nass or something, you're not going to have the same level of success.
But Matt Nass and just the success was just given to them. That deck was bonkers.
Yeah. All right. Next one, Cameron, read out. Tell me about midrange a little bit.
Midrange. Midrange is an amorphous term for any deck playing a fair game. And usually they're just trying to hedge its bets by between going fast and controlling the opponent. It's very open-ended, and they get their resource advantage in a multitude of ways. I always think of, obviously, the biggest mid-range deck is Modern Jund, in my mind. Like, I don't know Zoomer Jund, I know Boomer Jund. And Boomer Jund, like, when I think of mid-range, I think of cards that generally don't have any synergy together. Like, there is some, but it is just the best cards in that color, and that's kind of what Boomer Jund was. You just played like now there's like Wrenn and 6 synergy with Wrenn and 6 and Fetch Lands and Wrenn and 6 and Wastelands and Legacy.
That's gone.
Thank God that's gone.
And also in Legacy Jund, there's Punishing Fire synergies, but most of the time it's just good cards.
Yeah, there's sometimes you'll see cards that people are like, oh, that's obviously a mid-range card. I think one of the cards that a lot of people go to time and time again is Hand Disruption. Hand Disruption is a card, like, if you're playing Thoughtseize, usually you're seeing that either in a combo deck that's trying to clear the way for its combo, or you're doing a mid-range deck who wants to pressure the opponent but needs to create the opening to do it.
Yeah. People get angry at, like, force discard like that, but it's very fair. It's 1-for-1. You're not gaining any kind of advantage on your opponent. I mean, outside of with numbers, you're not. There's like hand knowledge and best card. There are those advantages, but strictly card advantage wise, it's a 1-for-1.
Yeah, but there's so many nuances that just saying 1-for-1 and this equal parity is just not really there. And then also, that's only talking about like duress, Thoughtseize cards like that. Bringing like Hand to Turok or Mind Twist. Yeah, that's where it gets a lot more. Because those are card advantage.
Well, those are card
they
advantage.
Do generate.
Yeah, those
2-for-1s in mid-range are certainly a thing. Kolaghan's Command has always been more defined as a mid-range card than anything else.
Yeah, that's a really good example.
Bloodbraid Elf is another one that does a good job. You're trying to get some type of 2-for-1 advantage, and you have to cast a 4-mana spell to get there. So, like, an aggro deck doesn't particularly want to be there, and a control deck would like their 4-mana spell to be winning the game if they can help it.
Yeah, Kolaghan's Command is a very classic one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And another one that I always loved in Standard was Kalidas, Trader of Geth, who's also getting played in Pioneer right now.
Really?
Really?
Yeah. Kalidas is seeing a fair bit of play.
He saw sideboard play Modern there for a bit, too. Kalidas is a good card.
Yeah. Kalidas, Trader of Geth has this huge advantage where if you kill an opponent's creature, or well, rather, if an opponent's creature dies, you make a 2/2. So...
And you exile the creature.
Yeah, and you exile their thing. And Kalitas can get larger by sacrificing the token, but that's not the most relevant part of it. The part is the killing off your opponent's thing to get another resource of your own. That leans into the control area, and that's also something midrange wants, though, because that's a very vulnerable threat still from just being a 4-mana 3/4. So control doesn't love that, but they'll play it rarely. But midrange loves it because they're going to play the disruption to kill the opponent's creatures to get through anyway. Now let's get into another amorphous archetype, Tempo.
Yay! We love this
So Tempo
thing,
is...
right?
Oh, I love it, but...
I love Tempo a lot, actually.
I don't like it in Legacy.
I love it, but...
certain archetypes of Tempo.
Yeah. The one thing I dislike about Tempo is trying to define it.
Yes.
Fair.
How would you define it, though, Jason?
Yeah, how would you do that, Jason?
Alright, so, it's amorphous in a similar way to how midrange is amorphous, and it can lean towards more an aggressive style or a more controlling style, especially since these two are the archetypes most confused for one another. Tempo's usual game plan is to resolve 1 to 2 threats early in the game, and then disrupt the opponent just enough for their early threats to win the game. As such, blue is the color that is most associated with Tempo, because you can play a 1-drop threat and then just back it up by counter magic for the rest of the game. But there's other decks, like Red-White Feather, which focuses around using Feather the Redeem's ability to protect using your instant speed protection spells and removal to create a board advantage, a little bit of more controlling style, but it also has this aggressive core and its early drop creatures that you're trying to protect, usually creatures that have heroic or prowess, like a Monastery Swiftspear.
Mm-hmm. To that point, blue definitely feels like the majority of Tempo decks. When I think Tempo decks, I think of Delver and Legacy, which is obviously a blue deck or a blue X deck. And then I remember the Blue-Red Wizards deck that Jeff Hooglin popularized back in 2018.
That was a cool deck.
That was a really cool deck. Cameron had that at one point, I think.
I did. You got to play Wizards Lightning, so you got to play 8 Lightning Bolts, which was fun.
Yeah. But those are the two decks I think of when I think of Tempo, because those decks are trying to land an aggressive threat, and it's ride those to the end, like Jason said.
Yeah. And they do have backup plans, though, which is one of the benefits of Tempo versus a normal aggro deck, for example, where your backup plan's pretty bad in an aggro deck. If you get stopped, you're just kind of stopped. Mm-hmm. Whereas Tempo can say, okay, depending on the Tempo deck, I will fall back on this Protect the Queen strategy, or I will fall back on this, I will control my opponent just enough to find another threat to get the clock started again.
Tempo is very fluid, and I think of Grixis Death Shadow as well as a Tempo deck from Modern.
Yeah, you're right.
When you're not on a shadow plan, the other cards you're playing in your deck, and Legacy Delver for another example, you still have cards like the bolts. You're playing all 4 of your bolts. You're playing all your counter magic, so you're able to you can fall back into a control deck-esque role. You're not a dedicated control deck, but you can fall back onto that, and then once you've stopped your opponent well enough, you play your threat and then go. Yeah,
and not to add too many archetypes to introduce into this, but one of the other archetypes that's very rarely talked about is Xerox.
Ooh, yeah, Xerox.
And Xerox is usually blue-red tempo or mid-range style decks that are backed up by cantrips and free counter magic. That's usually what they're talking about when they talk Xerox. That's why you only ever really hear Xerox in the context of Legacy and Vintage. I would make the argument that Blue-Red Murktide in Modern is a Xerox deck, though.
I don't know enough about that to comment on it being Xerox deck or not.
Generally, when I see Xerox, I normally see it in Vintage with all of the paradoxical outcomes. Sorry, just like the.
It's one of the ways they choose to win in that deck.
Tempo is good. It's very good.
Well, now, it's Vintage or something.
Yeah, Tempo is real good in Vintage, but it's also real good in Legacy. Then there's one more archetype that a lot of people don't necessarily consider this a macro archetype, but I wanted to discuss it.
Because I play it the most.
Ramp decks. Are they their own archetype compared to other things?
I would...
Tron.
Okay, so post Tron, and then like the mono green ramp when Pioneer first came around, and then also Tron and Pauper. I feel like it's used enough in decks. Like also Ponza is a ramp deck. Would you consider Ponza a ramp deck? Trying to get the Arbor Elf with the Utopia Swirl out consistently to power out.
There's ramp.
Aspects.
It has a ramp core to it, but I wouldn't consider it a ramp deck because the spells it's trying to cast aren't particularly high mana value. But then again, when you're talking about Modern, ramping into a 5-drop does that's a pretty significantly highly costed spell for Modern. So
I want to say it's its own archetype, but I feel it falls into sub-archetypes of other strategies. So, for instance, combo and control the two I think of whenever we talk about ramp. You have combo ramp. So, for instance, Primeval Titan decks. For Amulet Titan is a combo ramp deck. Tron is a combo ramp deck. Post, depending on the version, can be a combo ramp deck, right?
If you have keys in that deck, I would consider it combo.
Manifold.
The ones with keys. So again, this is my baby, right? I almost consider the ones with keys generally more in the control ramp decks because those you're also playing Chalice of the Void and Trinisphere. Eldrazi Tron playing Chalice of the Void. I feel like that's almost a control deck in a sense, but those can also be considered a mid-range deck. It depends on how you view those stacks pieces. Are you viewing that as the main game plan or as a support for the mid-range game plan?
I think it depends upon the core you have around it. Like you don't see this as much, but Eldrazi Post, I'd consider that an aggro deck it's an aggro deck with 4 Chalice of the Voids in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It toes the line between aggro and mid-range. I feel like it goes more mid-range. If you want Eldrazi aggro, just play the Eldrazi aggro deck with Once Upon a Time. Like that's just my opinion. But Eldrazi Post is out of the Legacy meta right now anyway, so because it hasn't existed in like 2 years. Rip.
Yeah, and to clarify this a little bit, this is another archetype we were going to mention in a second here, but hybrid archetypes exist. Certainly, like Tempo is in a sense a hybrid archetype between mid-range and aggro or aggro and control, which is the weirdest two you can combine together because they feel like they're doing directly opposite things, but
I feel like a majority of decks follow in some kind of hybrid. It's really hard to classify.
Everything.
I've been trying to
good
think
deck is hybrid.
I've been trying to think of a way to bring up Maverick because I'm me.
It's
more aggressive. It's control. I mean, I'm playing stacks pieces. I'm playing Wastelands. I'm trying to Wasteland lock people.
Yeah, me.
But also, I can make a Knight of the Reliquary 12/12.
Yeah, you have, to me, a lot, asshole.
Very much.
Yeah, and to be fair, like, when you break down these archetypes, there's arguments to be made of everything that you could say that the true unique archetypes are just aggro and control, and then everything else is a variation or combo of therefore. But even then, we just said that you can combine aggro and control to create something, so...
Right.
Is aggro and control combined just tempo, though?
That's what I was going to just... That's exactly what I was going to say.
But that's such a prominent combination that it feels like it has to be its own archetype. But I feel that's just like the perfect merriment of aggro and control.
Yeah, and congratulations. I think we've stumbled upon the theme of this, which is these archetype guides kind of suck.
April Fool's, guys.
It's hard to make these things make a whole lot of sense, especially because let's get into some variant factors that you will find in these types of decks. For example, is your deck linear or a non-linear / adaptive deck? We talked about aggro a lot in terms of being it's linear. It's trying to do something linearly and doesn't want to interact with the opponent too much, but there are adaptive or disruptive aggro decks like mono white decks that play stacks pieces.
Mm-hmm.
I think also like decks fall into situations like I'd consider Burn a fairly linear deck. But when you put it in the matchup against Grixis Death Shadow or Death Shadow, that completely turns the you're not a linear deck anymore. That is a very tiptoey kind of game. Mm-hmm. Whereas the Burn player doesn't really want to commit all their Burn.
Yeah. And this is one of the other things we get into is if we decide that ramp isn't its own archetype, well, then it becomes a variable factor, right? Where people love to talk about how certain archetypes traditionally beat another type of archetype, and ramp is always known as being the mid-range killer. Mid-range decks have a terrible time trying to play against ramp decks, and ramp decks have a terrible time against aggro decks and combo decks, and they're kind of like even or unfavored against control, but they can do okay. But of course, there's exceptions to everything.
Mm-hmm.
Like 12 post. There's 12 post dicks on miracles, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it did. That's right. I totally...
Uh-huh. I miss those days.
Yeah. I mean, I was just trying to think of, like, because obviously, like, the one I think that we're referencing mainly is, like, one of the main ones is Primetime Amulet Titan versus, like, Jund. But I was trying to think of the legacy.
Here.
Yeah, that's a ramp combo deck. So
yes, I was trying to think of the legacy equivalent mid-range deck that like 12 posts would like shit on, but it maybe just be Miracles. You know.
Hey, when Miracles comes back in the meta in like 2034, let me know and I'll bring 12 posts back out.
Got you.
Sounds good.
Appreciate it.
And then another factor of this is how fast does the deck go, and how much does it rely on combat? Obviously, you can have combo style decks that still care about combat quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
For example, Amulet Titan is a deck that traditionally just kills you through combat if it doesn't kill you with a Valakut. It has the option to kill you with Valakut, but I see Primeval Titans getting in there more than I see Valakut being activated.
Mm-hmm. They're 6/6 tramplers. They need to get in there.
Mm-hmm. Plus, you get your trigger again. So
yes.
Oh no, another trigger.
Or like a Monastery Mentor in a Miracles deck. Mm-hmm. That is winning through combat damage.
And traditional control win cons. There were times where creatures were the traditional win conditions of control decks before planeswalkers were more prevalent as the win conditions, right? Other times you have things where, in a very extreme example, it'll be a 2-card combo control piece, like when you're working with, say, Splinter Twin. That deck was pretty much just a control deck that had a combo finish.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And I want to mention Splinter Twin again later, so we'll come back to that.
We have a lot to say on Splinter Twin.
We do.
Another variable is what card types are you playing around? What's your theme? If you have one. Not all decks going to have it, but if you're a tribal deck, you have a theme.
If you're Bogles, your theme is pants.
Most Storm decks are trying to win through an Instants and Sorceries theme, but that doesn't change the fact that there's Paradoxical Outcome style Storm decks that rely on artifacts primarily. Or you can play Elves and be a combo deck.
Yep.
Yeah, creature combo. Or you can play Kobolds in Legacy, and I don't know what you do. You just do your thing.
About 10% of the time, it does a thing. That's about what
it's really cool when it happens.
Yep. And then the last thing is, we mentioned that card types are it, then there's another resource. Like, what resource are you trying to leverage? Are you trying to leverage your life total, the cards that you draw, cards in graveyards, or the permanents that are in play, or the number of spells that you cast? There's always something you're trying to leverage to win the game. The question is, what is it? And then, does that decide which archetype you're in, or can you do the archetype first and then decide the resource, so to speak? And for the most part, we've actually already talked about a lot of these archetypes. We had it set aside. The only one I want to bring up is a very unique combination of combo and aggro in Hogak.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah.
It's not too often that you see, like, a mix between dedicated combo and aggro very often, because oftentimes one of them is faster than the other, so just pick one of them. But Hogak just had this lovely thing where you cast your Hogak, you have your bridges in the graveyard, and you get your Altar of Dementia in play, and you just created this insane board state and were able to mill your opponent instantly. You can do this on turn 3 relatively easily.
Mm-hmm.
Was ridiculous.
So, now that we've established these are the archetypes that you primarily see in 60-card constructed, how well does that hold up in EDH, though?
I mean, from a macro level, looking at this, I'd say relatively well, but there's how about the Splinter Twin? Like, Splinter Twin's a control deck that has a combo finish. In the higher levels of EDH gameplay, every deck, for the most part, some restrictions apply. But everyone's a combo deck, right? When you're talking about cEDH, generally those have a combo finish to finish the game. Even the higher levels of play, it's hard. Like, would you consider Creative a combo? If we're talking about Creative's a combo, then every deck's a combo deck that plays green. So I feel like once you get to a higher level of EDH gameplay, every deck's a combo deck. But the overall archetype that just supports everything else going on, you know?
Well, you know my definition of combo, so...
Yeah. So Creative's a combo. A paperclip with a string is a combo.
Greater Hoof is a combo. Like, that is a card that is creating a combo.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to agree. As I said, or as I've written, the deck archetypes in general are less defined, especially when you go lower. We'll get into it in a minute, but it kind of goes to every deck is a value / X deck. So it'd be like a value aggro deck, or a value midrange deck, or a value control deck. You don't really see true dedicated of the aggro or tempo. There's not many tempo decks at all in Commander, to be frank. It's just hard. It's really hard to push that kind of archetype in a format where there's 3 people with answers that you have to try to ward off. The only one I can think of off the top of my head is Najeela. And as Ethan said, most decks have a combo finish. So take like Winota in cEDH. That is a very aggressive deck that can just win through punching you. And it does probably a lot. And it's also kind of control-y because it has the stacks pieces like Trinisphere, all your Thalias, all your everything costs more. But it also has key lines. I don't think it plays Splinter Twin because it can't get Splinter Twin off of Winota trigger.
Unbelievable.
In rare instances, I've seen it.
Okay. Well, I know there's Kiki lines, Combat Celebrant line. Kiki lines. Kiki lines.
Kiki lines.
I think when you say Kiki lines, it encompasses everything that also works with
you're playing some type of Splinter Twin style combo exists in a lot of Winota decks. You have, as you mentioned, the Combat Celebrant style win conditions as well. And it's worth noting that is an aggro deck that plays a lot of disruptive pieces, right? So we're talking in the aggro control sphere of things with a combo finish.
Aggro control.
Congratulations.
Combo. Say it real
We
fast.
combined 3 of the main archetypes, right? So, and yeah, I was going to say, I still use this general descriptor sparingly for these types of archetypes. But as was mentioned, every deck has some type of combo in it, whether that be for a value-based combo line. And again, I'm using the more radical definition of combo here, where I'm saying everything's trying to accrue some higher degree of value based on synergies, or it's just trying to win. But either way, I end up having to use a whole lot of these variables and descriptors in conjunction with those traditional 60-card archetypes to better describe a deck, especially when I need to talk about the difference between a tempo deck and a mid-range deck, or a mid-range deck and a control deck, where EDH significantly blurs those lines.
Oh, 100%.
So, as such, I ad hoc created a guide here, and we're gonna go through this and see how it holds up. All right. Major credit to Playing with Power for how they do their deck list introductions. A lot of this is based on the quick descriptions that they give of cEDH decks and their archetypes. So the first step, whenever I'm watching one of their videos, they always say whether or not it's an adaptive or a linear deck.
I really like that. That is very simple descriptor. There aren't many descriptors that can make decks be A or B. But that is a fantastic one.
Yeah. And if you want to throw in a third one of disruptive, that's okay. But when you get into the cEDH level in particular, like, even if you're a disruptive deck, that just means you're an adaptive deck. You're still trying to combo kill somebody. And then we go into our main archetypes, which I would make the distinction that the main archetypes of EDH are value, control, and aggro. Value has to be recognized as its own archetype in EDH.
I'd agree.
Now, you can be a hybrid deck, which we will get to when we talk a little bit about these secondary archetypes, where you combine these two things. You can be an aggro control deck, you can be an aggro value deck, you can be a value control deck. It doesn't matter. But those are the 3 main ones I would talk about. Then we have our secondary ones, where we start getting a little bit more descriptive on how you're trying to, like, what resources you might be leveraging to try to win the game. Ramp has to be recognized as its own archetype in EDH. And it is so prevalent that you have to talk about it is a ramp deck, or if it is not a ramp deck. Ramp exists in every deck, but there are decks that push hard to make sure ramp is one of their core features of their deck. Just to nail off the next couple, 4 big ones I thought of on this, stacks. If you're playing stacks as taxes, something to slow down your opponent, worth noting, but it also means you're playing to the board. Mid-range. you're trying to beat face, you're trying to do your value game. Usually that's what you're paired with. But I could also say that you have mid-range based control decks as well. Tempo. Tempo's its own thing. And tempo is not particularly common in EDH because value does a real good job lining up against it, but of course it exists. And then I mentioned hybrid, where you combine any number of these archetypes to get something else. All right. Step 4. What's your primary resource or theme? Are you doing creatures, tokens, lands, graveyard, reanimator, spellsinger, wheels, enchantress, artifacts? My commander is my theme? Or just having more cards than my opponent? What's my resource or my theme here to decide how I'm trying to play this game? And this is extremely diverse.
Oh yeah. I mean, think of any tribe, any kind of card type.
And the last one I want to go is just how are you winning the game? How you win the game may be different from what your primary resource or theme is. You know, you can say all you want that, oh yeah, I'm a merfolk deck, but Thassa's Oracle is my win con.
Boo.
You can play it the hard way if you want. But, you know, are you trying to deplete an opponent's resource, or are you trying to go for an alternate win con? Those are the two primary ways of winning the game. And I can't really think of how else you would do it, because, like, examples of this could be for the alternate win cons. You could say that, oh, my win con is Thassa's Oracle. Or you can say my win condition is Felidar Sovereign and just having that 40 life and getting to my turn. Or I'm trying to Helix Pinnacle. I just want to dump 100 mana into one single spell. Or commander damage is my means of win condition. Let's not forget that while damage is a normal way of winning, commander damage is an alternate way of winning.
Infect as well, while we're on that.
Yep.
Boo, Infect.
Infect?
I don't mind it in Commander, but I know people who hate it. So, what do you guys think on it at base? This is a really rough, I spent 30 minutes making this thing, so...
I mean, it encompasses fairly well, the majority. The thing is we touched on it earlier that there is no way to, put a clear definition on probably over 90% of decks, right? Especially in Commander, where at any point in any given game, some random card you play may make you the aggressive deck now for whatever reason. Like you commandeered an Avenger of Zendikar or something, right? Can you commandeer creatures?
I don't remember how that spell works.
Commandeer, you take control. There's one creature. Counter target spell. You can control the spell.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember if it's just any spell or if it specifies non-creature.
I don't know.
If you take control of a creature spell, you get that spell. So yes, it would resolve onto your... I'm just trying to remember if Commandeer says any spell or not. I'm pretty sure it does.
I mean, we have the World Wide Web at our disposal. Hold on.
It's much better if we don't even know and then the crowd just goes, yes, it's on screen. Can't you see it?
Yes. So the only issue is if I misspell Commandeer, it just puts me to the Commander format, and I don't need that right now.
What are you talking about? That's our life.
Commandeer. Commander? No.
Close enough.
Commandeer. Can I spell? No, too much effort. But decks often are in multiple of the... you could be a tokens deck, but you could also, when we're talking about, your step 2 primary resource theme, your primary resource or theme could be 3 of these. You could be a token lands deck, with what's the guy that cares about... I mean, Omnath, obviously, but also the guy that cares about basics, Phylath, I think?
Yeah.
Yeah, Phylath, World Sculptor, I believe.
Yeah. Or,
how about our best friend Hazezon Tamar?
Oh,
yes,
hell yeah.
As a lands token deck.
Mm-hmm.
Or an artifacts token deck, like the new guy, Jan Jansen? Right? The Mardu artifacts?
Yes.
I imagine that would be you're very leaning into the tokens, making treasures and making copters and servos and whatnot. But
yeah.
I'm just trying to think. I really like this, though. It doesn't show that you only did it in 30 minutes.
No.
Jason's good at what he likes to do.
Yeah.
And another thing about it, though, is unfortunately, I would love it to be pick one from each of these categories, but realistically, you can pick multiple. That's why, I have a brief analysis here of, is this thing perfect? And no. This is like 30 minutes to an hour of dedicated thought at most. And one of the things this doesn't do great is talking about variations of decks, particularly within combo and aggro. Like, snowballing aggro, stacks aggro, and traditional aggro are things I would consider very different. Burn is another thing that's just completely unaccounted for here, but that's kind of okay. You don't see burn that often in Commander.
120 life. It's hard.
Torbrand's not
It's
the
real
number one
hard
deck in the format.
Yeah, and even then, I wouldn't even think of Torbrand as like a traditional burn deck.
Like, you could do... Mill works as an aggressive deck. Mill can work with, like, a Phoenix? Is that its name?
Yeah, but Phoenix is also more like mill control as opposed to mill aggro.
It's not dedicated, like, this is a mill deck, this is a burn deck.
And Bruvac is like mill combo, right? So it's really hard to say exactly how to account for that type of variance in it. Also, there's a huge difference between 2-card combo decks and what I refer to as high APM or actions per minute combo decks.
I like that.
That's a really good way to put that.
Yeah, I mean, if you're playing... Y'all have seen how I do my Breya deck. My Breya deck is not... I went for the APM style combo deck as opposed to the 2-card combo deck in that deck. That deck is oftentimes more of a 2-3 card combo or build a small Rube Goldberg machine. In this case, I'm trying to do as many actions to find my way to the win. And Storm is the most recognizable high APM combo deck. That's very different from just your good old let me get a Splinter Twin in play or let me get my Thassa's Oracle in play.
They're a lot more fun to see happen. One thing that comes to mind for me is Ethan also had a Breya deck.
Yes.
And so anytime he had a board state where he had like a Rube Goldberg-esque thing that he was just, going through motions, repeating actions, and I'd be like, do you just win here? And he'd have to take a minute and think. He'd be like, oh yeah, I do.
If Cameron had asked the question, the answer was yes.
Ethan, do you win here? It was more so just to, like, he was going through these actions, and I was like, hey, make this win the game.
Well, I could. I just never saw it until you asked. And then it's like, oh, wait, I can.
Yeah, and then there's also another thing of maybe midrange does need to be considered one of the main archetypes as opposed to value. I think value is more present and more relevant because
100%.
Midrange... Yeah, like, I don't know if I would give midrange the same position that it has in 60-card constructed, because I think it is less likely, because what's more important is, are you doing this as a value train or not?
I mean, once you get, the lower you get in Commander, the more decks are just like, hey, this is a value deck. Like, look at every precon ever assembled. Most of the commanders are just a value commander, right?
Yeah. And one of the other things is a criticism of this whole type of phrasing works extremely well in cEDH, where everything has like a very clear game plan and knows exactly what it's trying to do. It's much more succinct. Whereas in casual gameplay, EDH, like, we just play cards because we like them.
Yep.
What's the card?
What can I say? Yeah,
I force that in every deck. It doesn't. It may not have any synergy with anything else in the deck, but
Mind's Dilation
it's there.
Is a fun card. 7-drop enchantment that does nothing. The turn comes down. Really.
Yeah, and that's EDH for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as such, EDH in particular is so bad about just everything's a hybrid deck. Everything's a hybrid deck anyway, but even more so in casual EDH.
Oh, 100%.
So that's why I was like, yeah, you definitely need to have value listed as one of the major ones. But it's really hard to say because everything in casual EDH is some type of
Everyone
value
likes
deck.
playing Guardian Project. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
If you're in a green creature deck, you play it.
Mm-hmm. And now that we've established these little bit of archetype stuff, let's go into what do these archetypes actually do to your game? How do they affect things? For example, if someone gave me their description of their deck based on this, let's say, hey guys, I'm coming in with a adaptive combo control deck that plays a lot of value piles using the graveyard, and my goal is an alternate win con. Immediately, someone said combo. So now I need to be watching out for everything you do.
They must die.
They play the land. They're the target.
They played a value enchantment. Hey, I bet that combo somehow. We got to get rid of that.
And
they told me
this
they're playing.
Like you guys are playing against me. Ethan play.
Yeah.
God.
They told me though. You're seeing here. You go. Okay. You're playing a control deck as well. You're playing value. So I know that things are going to be in play because you're playing a value deck. And I know that you're going to try to stop me from doing what I want to do. So even though you're playing a control deck, you're playing for a long game.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And you said graveyard? Okay, well, that means I need to not let this game go too long for you to load up your graveyard. And your alternate win con, I have no idea what the alternate win con is, but I know you're not going to try to attack me. So you're probably not too great at defending yourself, though.
So, punchies?
Yeah, time for punchies, right? Yeah, so like generally speaking, if it's combo, right, just be wary of the actions that are going on. If it's control or value, you cannot let the game go on for too long. Unless you are certain you can outvalue your opponent, which is gonna vary because it's commander.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure you still use proper threat assessment when you see these. Like, you see someone playing combo, and they haven't done, like, they're on 3 lands, and they play, I don't know, like a Goblin Electromancer, and it's like turn 7. You don't need to kill that Goblin Electromancer yet.
No.
It just because of the combo deck, Yeah.
Now, if they jammed specifically, say, a Phyrexian Altar into play.
See.
A little bit different then.
A little different.
Yeah.
That's a combo piece.
Yeah, now you're like, I mean, the Goblin Electromancer is a combo piece, but it's going to require a whole different type of cards to work with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you show me a Phyrexian Altar early, I'm like, okay, well, I have to start
KCI
taking
is a
some
big
action.
one. If I see a KCI at any point in the game, it dies. Does not matter. I'm sorry for whomever plays a KCI on turn 3 with nothing else on board. That KCI needs to die.
But Cameron, that's my favorite.
Or
why? Okay, I get the feeling that you just don't like playing against me, and that's why you keep on saying this stuff.
Jason also has a Brea deck that I assume Krark Clan Ironworks is in.
Yeah, it's there.
So
I can do KCI loops, but I intentionally do them poorly.
Intentionally.
And yes, intentionally done poorly.
What a Chad.
Let's go into this one. Aggro. Aggro's an archetype which, like, really dedicated aggro, you don't see that often in EDH.
No.
It's, as you mentioned before, if someone's aggro, they're the threat. Like, it's in play. You have to deal with that at some point.
Yeah, you can let other people die, then deal with it.
Yes.
That's how it normally goes.
My fellow commander players, have you considered not killing the aggro player right away?
No. Jason. My big number goes small, therefore me scared.
As the probably the person who plays dedicated aggro the most. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes.
The Voltron. We haven't talked about Voltron. Voltron is I don't want to say commander-specific aggro deck, because there is Bogles with pants.
It's a sub-archetype of aggro, I'd say.
I would add in there that Infect is also a Voltron deck.
Depends?
In Modern, it
in Modern, yes.
Modern, yes. I'm
okay, I thought you meant like in Commander. I was like, you can play Atraxa, play Ichor Rats, and just hope to proliferate 9 times.
No, most of the time that you see Infect, it is more
aggressive,
being played as a Voltron deck of some type.
You're not. Oh, yes. So, like, as the Voltron player, normally what happens in a game is you get to kill one person, you feel great, and then the other people decide to kill you because you're scary. My Zergo Helm Smasher deck has never seen the light of day on the channel because I killed someone on. I killed someone on turn 4 and felt bad.
It was Logan. It was turn.
I top decked the Teamer Battle Rage. I top decked the Teamer Battle Rage to kill him.
Does he have haste?
But have you considered Zergo Tribal board wipes?
Yes, I was playing like 8 board wipes in that deck.
That's got to get those numbers up. Those are rookie numbers.
Only reason you played that many is because you recommended it, Jason.
Yes, I was only playing like 3. And Jason was like, hey, you see the clause that says he's indestructible on his turn? Yeah. Nobody else gets to have creatures. You get to have a 7/2.
Jason likes to cause me pain.
It's great. It's great.
Because I was playing Amath at the time. That was just trying to play a bunch of jelly beans, a bunch of angry elementals. And so you're just like, cool, wipe my board.
Yes.
Yeah.
You got to bolt things a bunch of times.
Yeah, true. Yes. But again, those videos never saw the light of day because they were trash.
Yep. All right. Now, value decks. I've commented a little bit here. Value decks, and similarly control decks. Long game is the name of the game. Most value decks are not trying to win particularly quickly. Of course, they are capable of doing it, but you can be value combo, and you can take weird commanders that you wouldn't view as value decks and turn them into value decks. I was surprised with the 2-mana Amara when it was played on game nights, and how it was like, somehow Josh Lee Kwai turned this into a value deck.
It was really cool.
Just a value control deck and green-white.
That deck was cool.
But yeah, like, if you know that your opponents are going to be playing value decks, you have to hit the key pieces that are giving them value to shut off their engines. You have to race them, or you have to go over top of them. That's how you have to play against them. Mm-hmm. You cannot just ignore them.
No. That's my favorite part about when you play a value deck. What you hope people do is ignore you. Just sit in the back and draw cards. Like when I relate it to myself a lot, but it makes sense. It's our podcast. I'm on it. My Afara deck. You play one card. You play Assault Skidder and Afara, and hope nobody looks at you for the rest of the game while you draw 4 cards per turn rotation. And people, especially newer players, do not realize how impactful that is on the outcome of the game. Just how many cards you draw.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So what I'm hearing this podcast is secretly just an Afara Stan channel.
I'm here for it.
Obviously, we're just here to advocate for the banning of Afara. No. Or more specifically, Salt Skidder.
No. Ban Salt Skidder 2023. Let's go.
Give it the axe.
I just love cards like that see play in one deck, and in that deck, they're just like the best card in the deck. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Risen Reach.
Risen Reach is a great one, too. All right, last, traditional major archetype here. Control. Control really does struggle in Commander. It is not easy to 1-for-1 3 opponents.
No. Think about it. You're trying to 1-for-1 against 21 other cards, and you have 7.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And on the split side of this as well, control certainly is necessary. You need some amount of control over what your opponents are doing. That's why board wipes are the more common form of removal in the format. But at the same time, if you're going to try to 2-for-1 your opponents, your 2-for-1 spells cost more mana than what your opponents are playing usually. Mm-hmm. And if you're up against a value deck, for example, you can kill that Regal Force, but that Regal Force drew 8 cards.
Killing it after the fight doesn't do anything.
Yeah, so it's hard to get your setup going in that situation. And in the meantime, you've got somebody who's maybe playing more aggressively and is targeting you down. Or you have a value player who's like, well, I can get some chip damage in. Or, on the flip side, you also just run into those tables who go, I don't want to upset anyone, not attacking anybody until the combo's ready.
Attack people. Attack.
Feels good. Feels good to be the control player then.
That's what... People, if they do end up attacking you, they're doing it correctly. Number one. Yes. You are the correct person to attack. But you also, when you play, it's hard to play straight control, so you have to pair it with something. So, value engine, so, Nimrus comes to mind as a very value engine control deck.
Yes.
I played it and loved it. Everybody hated me. Because my win con, I didn't have the combo win con in that deck. My win condition was Hullbreaker Horror with a Rune Chanter's Pike on it. That's how I was going to win that game. It didn't get on camera. And then the second game got recorded and everybody hated me, so I died.
Yeah. I was
and I had Rise from the Tides. Wait, you were in that game, Ethan?
No, I was in the game that didn't get posted.
That's what I'm talking about. When I mana tithed you with your own mana tithe?
Yeah, I was about to bring that up, asshole. No, I wasn't even in the game where it got posted, and I hated you for it, too.
Yeah, I died, on turn 6 that game, it feels like. I died so fast.
Hey, you got aggroed out.
No, I'm not mad
Yeah.
about it correctly, because you can't let those decks get their feet under them.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned the value engine piece. Planeswalkers are in 60 card constructed a common way of getting your value engine on, because it's a 1 a turn value engine, but hey, it wins games eventually. Eventually. The other thing is compact combos. Like, control plus compact combo, like Splinter Twin, is very potent.
Yeah.
Yep. Thoracle is the premier one right now. Hate it, but...
I mean, it was Flash Hulk back in the day.
Flash Hulk was a big one. It's just the A plus B combos and a shell that is just trying to make your opponents, like, you let them use all their resources.
It's an A plus B shell that's trying to make your opponents not play the game.
Yes.
Yep. And there's also something to be said of, there's a bit of an exception to talk about in the form of stacks or aggro control style decks. Yeah, they're applying pressure and controlling the game. That's honestly a little bit more tempo, but you know what? That's a terrible debate to try to have for Commander.
Kamal Timna is the best cEDH deck. You don't need combos. You just...
Yeah. Prison stacks, on the other hand, you can play win-conless prison stacks. I don't recommend it. The problem with doing that is your win-con is probably milling your opponents out by them drawing a card every turn.
I mean, you could also do some... Another one is, I think, Gavi, Grand Arbiter. Would you consider it win-conless? I mean, it has Painter, Servant, Grindstone.
So I have played against genuinely win-conless Gavi stacks decks.
What about...
They intentionally made sure they did not draw an extra card the entire game, and they just made sure you drew one more card than them before they established the lock.
So, like, there's also, like, Mycosynth Karn locks. That's another win-conless lock. If you just said, if you have more cards in your library, you win the game.
Yep.
Or not even just Karn, like Mycosynth Collector. Because Karn, you can still do anything you want. They just your opponents are locked out. So more so a Collector Oof Mycosynth.
Yeah, that's an example of a genuinely win-conless stacks deck. Another win-conless stacks deck I played against was a Sin Triplets stacked stack. And yeah, the whole goal of that deck, and this really early on in me playing, was to just hope that there's somebody at the table who is playing some combination of Esper colors so you can actually cast a spell from your opponent's deck.
Old Commander rules.
Yep, old Commander rules. And all you were trying to do was establish a lock where your opponents could not cast spells, but you could cast a spell from their hand.
So that's actually kind of cool.
Yeah.
Hate that. I like that.
This was, before the days of Boseiju, before the days of most people playing some type of free interaction to get around these types of effects. So people genuinely just had no way of getting out of this. And eventually, they would just find a creature out of an opponent's deck and go, cool, here's the win con.
I love it.
I kind of like that. That's hilarious.
I love it and hate it.
How do you only cast spells out of your opponent's hand? Is it like a knowledge pool? No, it can't be a knowledge pool type thing.
No, I mean, it's in this situation, it was not a knowledge pool specific thing. It was just you had no cards in hand because of how you were doing this.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
You couldn't cast spells from your own hand. You had to cast spells from your opponent's hand because you just didn't have a hand.
One with nothing, yes.
More so like solitary confinement and something else.
I know. I was just making a joke.
Yeah. But either way.
We will find a way to break that card someday.
And then other than that, one thing I do want to talk about as like an archetype thing is ramp. Most of the time when people talk about ramp in a casual commander environment, they are talking about ramp value decks. Because ramp on its own is not strong.
No, you need something to back. Let's not. I'll just I jam every single explosive vegetables affecting your deck and just hope to get there somehow.
I'll be real with you. Like, that's the main issue with my Hazezon deck. It's designed to be a very casual deck to play at any power level I could possibly find. But because it doesn't have much value engine stuff in it, it just ramps and plays a Hazezon and goes, okay, don't kill it.
Or
that's enough.
Or kill it before the boys come out.
That's my job. But yeah, so I think oftentimes when people talk about having issues with ramp, I think more so what they're having issue with is value and how it complements ramp. But that doesn't mean that, ramp's not something that you should keep an eye on as a larger archetype. But it genuinely doesn't skew how I play against the deck very much. I don't skew my opinion on playing against ramp versus playing against value. I just view it as playing against value.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, there are very few, if dedicated ramp decks, they're normally paired with a Tatiova or a AC or, Omnath.
Yeah. You pair it with control. You don't find ramp paired with aggro particularly often. It happens.
You could argue that the green jelly bean, mono green jelly bean.
Yeah, that's a pretty good example of one. You could also maybe do Obun as a ramp aggro deck.
Obun.
But yeah, that's the Naya Precon Commander one
Rising.
from Zendikar Rising.
Oh, yep.
Yep. Yeah, that guy's maybe, but also I really see him more oftentimes as a value deck because ramp complements value extremely well, but it doesn't complement aggro particularly well.
Yeah.
Complements combo fine.
Yeah,
Not the best, but
I think it
fine.
actually complements control somewhat too. Just being able to have the mana to, to do the 1-for-1s or the 2-for-1s. You need a lot of mana for those 2-for-1s.
Yeah. And one final question. Would you guys ever consider your EDH deck just as a mid-range deck?
No.
No.
I don't think mid-range is descriptive enough.
Yeah.
Particularly because every mid-range deck is some type of value deck for the most part. Again, we actually played against... I was playing in our community game night last night. By the way, join our Discord, playing community game nights. It's a ton of fun.
Ayo.
But I was playing against a Saskia deck that was an aggro... it was mostly an aggro deck, but it was really very much on the mid-range lines. And it had value pieces, of course. This was Saskia good stuff, and it was fun to play against. But I was trying to sit there and think, how would I describe this deck to people? And I was just I don't know how I would describe this deck in a cohesive way. Is this really aggro when I'm seeing Massacre Worm in the deck? I'm seeing things like Toski in the deck, which is a great mid-range and value-based card. It's really hard to make that description. So I was I don't think I can call this mid-range. I think I just have to call this value aggro.
Yeah.
I know I thought of my Obeka deck when you posed the question, because it's it's doing some mid-rangey things, but you can't say it's a mid-range deck. It's kind of wacky. It's doing a lot of value stuff, specific to Obeka.
Yeah. Maybe there's a consideration for, I don't know what archetype this goes into. You tell me.
You tell me, please.
When I think of the decks I've had that might be considered mid-range, Team Elemental's the one that I think seems more around that. But even then, that feels very value-ish because it's a ramp deck and it does a lot of
very much
high synergy stuff. So it doesn't even fit into that. And nothing really feels mid-range in Commander. I feel mid-range, if you're playing a mid-range deck, you're not going to get anywhere to actually close to winning.
See, when I think of mid-range, I know it's not 100% true. I think I mentioned earlier. I just think of the best cards in that color pairing. So Boom or Jund. It is just the best cards that you can think of off the top of your head in Jund. The cards themselves have no synergy, and you really can't get anywhere in Commander with that, as Ethan said.
Yeah. I think for me, the card that's been printed somewhat recently, where anytime I see it, the archetype that comes to mind is mid-range, is Elder Gargaroth.
Yeah, that's a good card.
All three of those abilities feel mid-range extremely well. It's not really control. It's a value piece, which again kind of speaks to where mid-range lies. But whenever I see it in Commander, it never feels like it's enough value for me to warrant an inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
but it does apply enough of a threat that maybe it is worth an include?
I think it depends on the deck. Like, again, everything, circumstantial. I know Chandler's included it in a few decks he's played on the channel that he's really enjoyed having it in. I forget what the last one he played it in was.
I think it's a pet card for Chandler, honestly.
That might be it, too.
Gnawbone. He plays it in Gnawbone a lot.
He plays it in Gnawbone. I feel like he's also in Thrasta at one point.
In what deck?
Probably.
Thrasta, Tempest Roar from MH2.
Green Storm.
Yes. I do believe. I mean, it's a really good mid-range piece, value piece. It's attack or block, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
So it's also kind of a control-y piece where people don't want to attack into it just because I don't want to give them the card. I don't want to give them the free creature.
It can fill some roles at the same time, though. Anytime I'm like, I don't know, it's never quite enough. Like, it's never enough value for me for my dedicated value decks. It's never enough. It's not good enough stats for an aggro deck, despite the fact that it offers a 6/6 for 5, which is
Vigilance Reach.
That's pretty good.
Trample.
If I'm playing a ramp deck, I feel like I can get more value at a higher spell. Like, it just never feels like quite. Yeah, it's 5 mana, which is like right at the point where you're competing with so many great value engines.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a good one. It really is.
I like this card a lot.
Maybe if I find a green tempo deck, I'll try it out.
I was going to say, I feel the main issue is if you're not in mono green, then it especially there's a lot more value options within multicolor pairings.
Yeah. And we didn't cover tempo too much. I will say that there are some decks where I think people need to expand their expand their horizons on what they would consider a tempo deck. Because for me, I consider Brina a tempo deck.
I can see that.
Yeah, you play Brina, and you protect. You're getting in with punchies. You're riding that threat to victory.
Yeah, get an early creature down, protect the queen. It ends up kind of being a Voltron deck if you put all the counters onto Brina, but you don't have to. Mm-hmm. You're giving your opponents advantage, which is not what you want to do in tempo decks, but who cares?
Commander.
I mean, blue Voltron decks can kind of fall under. Mm-hmm. Not even Voltron. Specifically blue, just Voltron in general can kind of be tempo-y. Yeah,
Voltron can fall into the tempo category. The other big deck that I always view as tempo is Najeela.
Yeah.
Or at least there's builds of Najeela that are definitely tempo decks. Like the win con is Najeela and nothing else.
It's not hard to break Najeela and win with Najeela, though.
No,
it is not.
You're right.
Hi, I would like one of my 6 different pieces that combo with her for infinite. Thanks.
Yes.
But with that, I think we've covered everything we wanted to talk about today. Thank you all once again for watching another episode of the Wrinkly Brain Podcast. As a reminder, this is the last episode that we are going to have of the Wrinkly Brain Podcast on SmoothBrainEDH, this channel. We are going to be moving it and our other long-form content like stream VODs over to the WrinklyBrainEDH channel. So be sure to check that out if you want to check out that type of content. In addition to that, usual outro stuff. Hey, go check out our social media links in the description. We have a Patreon now. You can sign up and do that. We got our first patron and we're happy about that. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And again, we got our Discord. Come play with us on Discord. It's a ton of fun. We enjoy it greatly. And with that, thank you all very much. I do have one more small announcement. I hope this time I don't jinx myself, but we do have a guest coming on soon. So,
you better not mess up.
And no, it's not Sheldon.
You better not mess up for me. You know how excited I'm about this guy.
Yes, this is a guest that is very near and dear to Ethan's heart, and also not someone from our channel. So, hopefully we'll have something really fun for you guys on the next episode. Until then, take care. I've been Jason with Cameron and Ethan. This is the Wrinkly Brain Podcast. Y'all have a great day.